So GTA 5 Enhanced just released on PC. We also have GTA 5 Legacy. This is the original. So GTA 5 Enhanced has some changes that were introduced in the PS5 and Series X and S like 3 years ago. Well, one thing I wanted to mention about the original, this game's anti-cheat is not configured to support the Steam Deck, so you cannot play GTA Online on Linux anymore. It's been a while since this happened. But the single player does work, so we're going to be trying that out because this one has the same issue. So let's get into it right away. Alright, so welcome to the options menu. There's been a few changes. Now we no longer have the advanced settings separate from the graphics options. We got 800p, VSync, frame limit, ray tracing, which we are going to enable. I'm going to talk more about ray tracing in a moment. Then when it comes to frame scaling, there is FSR3, FSR1, and the normal linear upscaling. Personally, right now, at least when it comes to ray tracing, I'm going to turn it off to show you something. When it comes to the other settings, it's pretty similar to the original, so I highly recommend you keep it like this. It looks almost the same, but there's less grass. And with all these options, shadows, if you put them on very high, you're going to have, well, performance drops because it also casts shadows from your vehicle using the vehicle lights. So that casts shadows in real time. I turned that off in the original as well. Post effects on normal because I don't use motion blur or depth of field. When it comes to the scene sliders, I kept them like this to help the CPU. So we'll start with those settings. So ray tracing on. Alright, so with those settings, let's see, we have, again, ray tracing on. And as you can see right now, I obviously picked a rainy weather on purpose to see those reflections. So as you can probably notice, now those puddles of water, whoa, that was a bug, a visual bug. Everything is reflected right now. Of course, it has a lot of pixelation. That's because of the resolution. The higher the resolution, the better that will look. But here, as you can see, we hard lock to 21 FPS, which might seem weird, but it's not weird. It's because there's reflections over here. But when those load, you get something like this. So loading all that destroys the frame rate. So we're going to fix it. So to fix this, when using ray tracing, please enable FSR3 on balanced or quality. I recommend balanced. And when it comes to ray tracing, there's no ray tracing, high, very high, and ultra. And I'm disabling global illumination and ambient occlusion. These two, at first glance, these are the most subtle ones, to say it in some way. Then when it comes to the ray trace shadows, you can put this on high actually. And the ray trace reflections, I put them on very high because otherwise they aren't particularly great. So we applied these settings, balanced FSR3, very high reflections, and now we get 30 FPS with the game looking softer obviously because we're using upscaling. And now by looking at the reflection, yeah, the reflection looks worse because ray tracing with less resolution means less rays. It reflects geometry at a very, very low distance. This is what the PS5 uses. Yeah, the performance is way better. But at that point, I would say why enable ray trace reflections in the first place is very, very limited. So again, my advice to make it worth enabling is to put it on very high, the shadows and reflections. Something like this, there's no medium. And these two, to not destroy performance, keep them disabled, and you should be good. And I want to thank Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. They sell cheaper games for PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch. Right now you can find Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 for $48.40 US, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth for $40. You can also find GTA 5 and Hogwarts Legacy for a cheaper price. And with this partnership, we're giving away a free game to one of you guys each month. Just hit participate. You still have 27 days for this one. And one of you guys will win and get any game of your choice on Instant Gaming. So thanks again to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. Let's continue. So with that out of the way, now we got reflections that actually are worth enabling considering the performance impact. and you're basically having pretty good graphics with ray trace reflections. I mean, ray tracing on a Steam Deck. Interesting. Of course, due to the FSR3 balanced upscaling, the reflections look worse. We're borderline 30, at least when it's raining. I'm doing this on purpose, because everything is reflective when it's raining. That's kind of the point. And now looking at Franklin, we also have reflections on glass. Might be difficult to see, but on the ground is also being reflected. So yeah, it looks cool, but that's about it. It's just, in this case, better reflections. Especially by, if you're looking at the glass over there, is the most obvious thing. But again, when it comes to ray tracing, personally on Steam Deck, I don't really care for ray tracing. I rather have a smoother frame rate than 30. But the ray tracing heavily hits the GPU and CPU. And this game already hit the CPU pretty hard, at least when targeting 60s. But I'm going to show you that in a moment as well. But without rain, really the most noticeable reflections are on the outside of the cars. So the windows on cars, the metals, and glass, basically. So outside of rain, that's the most obvious change, I would say. Okay, so now that I'm here, I perfectly landed my helicopter. You can see glass, very low resolution reflections, but it reflects basically everything up to a certain distance. But again, if you're playing on high reflections, you're basically going to see Franklin and maybe a small portion of the helicopter. Okay, so now time for a stress test, which means explosions. Apart from ray tracing, there is better particle effects, better fire, and better smoke. Although it's going to be less noticeable on Steam Deck because I had to lower those settings to maintain this performance with ray tracing. So now we're going into the smaller screen. Yeah, when using ray tracing, don't even think of unlocking the frame rate. When it comes to battery life, probably 3 hours at best. When there's a lot of explosions, the GPU suffers a lot, so consider balanced FSR3. I'm using quality here, but again, the biggest thing that you're getting here is basically ray trace reflections and, well, ray tracing shadows. So the draw distance of the shadows is a bit better. But using settings lower than this with ray tracing on, I don't think it's worth it, because the ray tracing on high instead of very high, it doesn't look particularly amazing. So again, this is optional. Personally, again, I wouldn't play it like this, but it's nice to see that you can actually do ray tracing on Steam Deck. I mean, this is an old game and all that, but it's still, we're talking about ray trace reflections over here. Here into the options, we go into ray tracing and we put off. Then when it comes to FSR, you can disable it. There's now TAA that wasn't there before. If you don't like TAA, there's FXAA, or you can disable anti-aliasing completely. In this case, I'm using TAA. I think in the smaller screen it looks pretty damn good. That's just my opinion, of course. And then when it comes to the settings, something like this. This is what I used on a video 1.5 years ago when it comes to settings. Trying to get 60s, but we'll see what happens. Of course, we gotta do a real test. When driving fast or flying a helicopter, as an example, I originally, in this previous video, that I was targeting 60s, trying at least, I was getting drops below 60 when flying, and this is not an exception. We are CPU limited when flying. So back then I was on an LCD Steam Deck, I recommended locking it to 45 or 40s. Same here, in order to avoid that CPU limitation. I think you're better off locking it to 45. So when you're driving around very quickly, plus police chasing you, AI going in the background, all that, you can actually maintain a consistent frame rate. If you don't mind drops into the 40s while flying or driving fast, then you should be fine with an analog frame rate. Okay, so now Franklin's turn. Not flying the helicopter. As you can see, it still suffers even with the 45 FPS lock in some locations. But again, overall that happens when flying. I think 45, 90% of the time you should be there. But about this new version, personally, again, I think on the Steam Deck, you can play whichever of them you want. Maybe choose this option if you want those better particles and some improved destruction, especially when it comes to glass. I mean, if you shoot glass now, there's more shards. Similar to what physics games looked like back when that was a thing. Of course, with explosions very close to the camera, it drops with lots of fire. I'm obviously stress testing this. It's not like the entire game, it's like this. But again, the main issue I would say on Steam Deck is that the anti-cheat that Rockstar chose to put doesn't allow Linux to play GTA Online. It was possible in the past. If you see my previous video on this, I was on SteamOS playing GTA Online, and GTA Online was way harder on the CPU. I had to lock it to 30 FPS, but I cannot test it now because it's not working on Linux due to the anti-cheat. So I'd say that's what Rockstar needs to change. Allow Linux to play the game so Steam Deck people can actually play online. I think that's very important. Other than that, performance is pretty similar to the original, I'd say. It just looks cleaner thanks to the TAA implementation. On bigger screens, TAA doesn't look great, but on the Steam Deck, actually TAA I think it looks pretty good. It makes the game look way cleaner, especially when it comes to transparencies. But if you don't like that, you can always use FXAA instead, or play the original. I've been playing this on Steam Deck for a while, and battery life was completely fine. You can probably go lower on settings when it comes to the original. But if you're playing it at similar settings than mine, honestly the new version I think is also a good way to experience it. In this case, again, on the Steam Deck it doesn't matter much because you're not playing GTA Online, unless you're on Windows, but that's a different story. Most people are on SteamOS if they have a Steam Deck. And now that I'm here, let's see how fast we can swap characters. Generally, it was pretty fast even in the original, installed to the SSD. Yeah, it's still pretty damn fast, as you can probably notice. If you're on a MicroSD card, it's going to take longer, so keep that in mind. So yeah, if you're on MicroSD, it's going to take longer to do that character swap. On the SSD, it takes a few seconds. I mean, just look at that. So loading is fast, changing characters is fast, there's better effects, but the original is still pretty fast when loading a different character. So again, I will play this version if you're okay with, well, better particles when things explode, and if you care about having a better options menu and TAA. I would say for the Steam Deck, the biggest advantage in this one is that TAA, on the smaller screen at least in my opinion, it looks way cleaner. Aliasing is way less noticeable than on the original that had FXAA or MSAA, but MSAA was super expensive, at least on the GPU. It has a bit different shadows, it has better glass shattering technology, but again, the core game is the exact same. It's just better graphics overall and the option to use ray tracing. You can use ray tracing on the Steam Deck with upscaling, but personally, it's GTA 5. I'd rather keep overall better resolution and FPS. because you have to sacrifice the resolution for ray tracing and sacrifice the frame rate as well. So I'd rather play at 45 consistently with traversal and all that than 30 FPS with lower resolution but nice reflections here and there. It occupies less space in this version as well, so that might be important to you, but you can again transfer your save file so you don't miss your single player stuff. My hope is that Rockstar allows us to play on Linux, at least GTA Online, because that's absolute BS. It used to be possible, now it's not, and well, it used to be verified, now it's unsupported because of that limitation. So if we ever get GTA Online again on Linux, I'll make another video showing you this again. Right now, I personally would use this version. I think it looks pretty cool when it comes to effects. And the TAA they included, I think it looks pretty good on the smaller screen. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did taking a look. And I'll see ya next time. Bye guys. Thanks for watching.